next, we're going to be talking about our second segment, and I teased it a little bit before we went to break, but it is young player extension candidates, and the first in the American League, and then we'll move to the National League after. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is we've seen it as a big trend in baseball recently, younger players getting extensions that buy out their arbitration years and maybe 1 or 2 years of free agency as well. We've seen it with Bobby Witt Jr. this year. We saw it with Julio Rodriguez last year, Corbin Carroll, even guys like Spencer Strider, Michael Harris, going back a long time, Ronald Acuna Jr. And today we had some rumors about Brian Bayo from the Red Sox potentially getting an extension. We had some rumors about Francisco Alvarez. That would prove false, unfortunately, for me. I would love that to get done as a Mets fan. But so I just wanted to talk about it because there was some stuff going on with that, and spring training is the time to get extensions done for any player, young or old. You've seen it with guys like Zach Wheeler as well, who've mentioned it. So, let's just get straight into it and mention the guys I want to talk about here. So, first, we're starting off with the New York Yankees. Who else? And we're going to talk about the obvious choice here, Anthony Volpe. Anthony Volpe was one of the top prospects in baseball for a long time. Was kind of heralded as the second coming to Derek Jeter at the shortstop position. Now, I don't know if he's going to be that good as a guy who grew up watching Jeter and is my favorite player of all time, but he's still a good player. His glove is really, really fantastic. If he can get his hitting to a good amount above average, he's going to be a superstar in this league, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the Yankees to lock him up early. I think his floor as a player is really, really good because of the defense. He's from Jersey, grew up a Yankees fan, so I think that would help with your case of getting to extend him. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think he's definitely a extension candidate for the Yankees right now. Next, the man I talked about before, Brian Bayo from the Red Sox. Bayo has shown flashes of being a future ace for Boston, has electric stuff, is an electric player, is very young, has shown a lot of flashes, and was a top prospect before this. Didn't have the greatest season the last year, but it was still good. Having a 4.24 ERA in the AL East isn't something to cough at, especially as a young player still trying to find his way. So I definitely think he's a future ace for the Red Sox, and I would say that it makes a lot of sense to extend him. You don't really extend pitchers usually just because of the wear and tear on arms, how much injuries they usually have, but I think it makes sense to lock him in, get some, start building specific parts of that young core before guys like Roman Anthony, like Cedeno Rafaela, like Marcelo Mayer, like Kyle Teal come up and kind of have a building block to build around them in a starting pitcher like Bayo. I also made a short on it, so check that out on the channel. The Blue Jays, not many options here. I went with Davis Schneider. I don't really think they should extend him, but he is the best candidate. The Jays kind of have a lot of middle-aged players, no real young stars. I could have went with Ricky Tiedemann, but again, I'm not a big fan of extending young pitchers, especially ones that haven't been up to the major leagues. So, yeah, he had a very good season last year, of course. Was one of the better hitters in baseball when he came up. Did get a bit lucky, but is still a good player, I think. So maybe they will extend him to a contract if they believe his run last year was legit. I doubt it, but again, I think he's the most likely one if you had to look at something for the Blue Jays. Next, Tampa, Junior Camarino. So he is one of the top prospects in baseball for the Rays. He came up a few games this year, didn't do that great, but again, it was a cup of coffee. We're not going to judge off that. I think it will make a lot of sense for the Rays to extend him. He's going to be a monster hitter, a monster player in this league. He's going to be a superstar for the Rays, adding into that core with Paredes, with Rosarena, other guys as well, including the pitchers that are hurt, like McClanahan, when he comes back. So it makes a lot of sense for them to do this now. So I think he's going to be really good, and I think when you have a small market team like the Rays, locking up your young superstars early is important. Obviously, they did it before, and they might have some PTSD from that with Wander Franco. But I don't really think it's fair to judge every single young player off what Wander Franco did, or what he's accused of, sorry. That's kind of a extreme scenario that is not fair to just penalize all other young players with. I think it's an outlier, and I think the Rays are smarter to do that. I think the Rays are smarter than to do that. And I think getting Camarino and extending him for a while can get you another face of the franchise after Wander's probably gone for a little while. The Orioles, easy one. Adley Rutschman, one of the best catchers in baseball. Young, only played 2 years. I also want to add, I forgot to mention this before, for me, a young player is someone who has played 2 years or less. There might be some outliers with that, but we'll get to them if it happens. So yeah, going back to Adley, sorry about that. I forgot to mention at the start. I should have. Adley, yeah, I mean, he's one of the better catchers in baseball. Face of the franchise of the Orioles already, even with all the other young players they have. This is a relatively easy scenario. I think they're going to extend him, actually. I think new management's going to make that a priority, as they should. And I think it makes a lot of sense. He is a superstar. He is the face of Baltimore baseball. And he is really, really good. Going to the AL Central now, we have the Guardians. We have Tanner Bybee. Tanner Bybee was a guy I didn't really have on my radar going into 2023, but surprised me a lot and was very, very good. Had a great season, under 3 ERA with the Guardians. Became one of their better pitchers, even in a team with a lot of good young pitchers. So I think it'll make a lot of sense for the Guardians to maybe lock him up, get something to build around with that core. When the Guardians kind of right now are in kind of a little awkward period of trying, not really contending, but not really being really bad. They did get this second overall pick in the draft, so good for them, I guess. I don't know how they did it. I think it was the first overall pick, actually, sorry. So they got lucky in the lottery, so that could help with that. But yeah, I think extending Bybee makes sense, make him a face of that franchise, and yeah, he's a really good player and a really good pitcher. I'm not a fan of extending pitchers, as I said before, because of just the wear and tear on the arm, but Bybee's really good, and I think he's the best candidate to receive an extension out of the young players on the Guardians roster. Next, White Sox. We're going to go with a player who I mentioned last episode and also has not played in the MLB yet, and that is Colson Montgomery. Now, you might be looking at me like, why the hell would a prospect get a huge contract? Well, we've seen it, and we've seen it with their AL Central counterpart, the Tigers. They just did it with Colt Keith a few weeks ago. Julio Rodriguez got it. Corbin Carroll got it. So young players coming up as prospects, even though they haven't played. We just saw it with Jackson Chourio as well. I don't know, I forgot that example. But young players coming up who are top prospects for these mid-market teams, even though they do play in Chicago, they don't act like a big market team because they're run by Jerry Rosendorf. So I think it makes a lot of sense to extend him before he gets to the big leagues. He's going to be up this year. Get him locked up quickly. Get another face of the franchise with him and Luis Robert. Make that your dynamic duo and start building for the future, which you're doing right now, and do it even better. So, next, Riley Green for the Tigers. Now, you may be surprised I didn't go with Spencer Torkelson here, as he was heralded as a future star, as a guy who could be a big part of the Tigers' future, the first overall pick, but he hasn't shown me enough to where I'd be comfortable giving him a huge extension. I still think he's going to be a good player in the future, but as of right now, I don't think so. I mean, as of right now, he hasn't shown it. Riley Green has. He's been a great player, really broken out with the Tigers, really just become great and shown he's their future center fielder. So I think it makes a lot of sense right now to extend him if you were going to extend anyone, if you are the Tigers. Next, we have the Twins. To me, it's Eduardo Julian. He broke out last year kind of out of nowhere. He hit really, really well, played a good second base, kind of added to that underrated young Twins core, as I mentioned yesterday. With the trade of Jorge Polanco, he's definitely going to be a starter now. Probably shifts over to first base with that great infield with him, Brooks Lee, Carlos Correa, Royce Lewis. So, yeah, I think getting him locked up long-term if you're a team that plays in Minnesota is a really good idea, just because, again, you're going to see this, but they're not as big of a market. So it does make a lot of sense for me to do that. Next, the Royals, Vinny Pasquantino. Vinny Pasquantino is really, really good. I think he's the DH/first baseman of the future for that Royals team that's trying to compete this year, obviously, with the moves they've made. Obviously, they just extended Bobby Witt. So getting another guy in there to kind of have two players to build around, like Pasquantino, it makes sense. And I think he's a really good player who's going to hit the ball really, really good in his career. And I think getting him extended now would make a ton of sense for the Royals and both Pasquantino as well, who voices how happy he is with the Royals on his social media very often. He is a Jets fan, though, so I apologize. I'm sure he's looking for better days right now. Unnecessary straight Jets fan, sorry. So next we're going to move to the AL West. finally, and we have the Astros going to start off with, and that to me is Yainer Diaz. Diaz was the backup catcher last year to Martin Maldonado. To a lot of fans' dismay, they thought he should have started over Martin Maldonado, but Dusty Baker wouldn't budge. He should have started over Martin Maldonado. I agree with that wholeheartedly, but that's a different conversation. With Martin leaving for the White Sox, Yainer is going to be the starting catcher every day. He's a great hitter, needs to work on the defense a little bit like most catchers, most young catchers, but he's still really good, hits the ball really well, and I think he's going to be part of that evolving core for the Astros with players like Bregman, like Kyle Tucker. We don't know what their future is, but getting a guy like Yainer Diaz locked up, I think will make a lot of sense to make sure you have him. Dana Brown's done it already with Christian Javier and said he's exploring it with other players, so maybe Yainer Diaz could be it. I chose him over Jeremy Pena as Pena was inconsistent last year with the bat, and I think Diaz might be a better player in the future. Angels, Zach Neto. Zach Neto came up almost immediately after getting drafted, was a great shortstop for the Angels, played very, very well. I think he's going to be the franchise shortstop in Anaheim for a long, long time. He's a really good player, and I'm excited to see what he does. I definitely think if you're the Angels, you should try to get Zach Neto locked up. It makes a lot of sense. With Ohtani gone and you don't know what the future of Trout and Rendon are, you need another face of that franchise, another guy to build around, and Zach Neto could be that guy if he keeps playing like he is. So this would make a lot of sense to me. Next, we have the A's. Not many choices for the A's. They're not a great team, as we know. I went with Esteury Ruiz. Ruiz is not a great player. He's okay. He steals a lot of bases, had 60 last year. So maybe a little Ricky Henderson without the other things Ricky Henderson brought. You know, it is the A's, so you have to make the Ricky Henderson comparison when you're talking about Oakland. So I may be getting him to a small-term deal would be nice. He's a good player, just not a great one. I don't know how much more you're going to get out of him. But again, the A's don't have a great future, don't have a great core right now. So there's no one else really to mention here. So I had to settle with him. He's not a bad player, just not a great one. So next we have Seattle. I have George Kirby for this. This was a pretty easy decision with Julio Rodriguez already locked up. It was pretty easy to pick one of the young pitchers, and I think the best one here is George Kirby. He's a future ace, in my opinion, going to be a big part of that Mariners future that tries to finally win the World Series with Julio there as well. So, I think he's great. I think getting him locked up would be great. Obviously, young pitchers, you don't really know how they're going to fare in the future because of arm and fatigue and injury and all that, but I think Kirby's an exception because he's really, really good. I would look to extend him right now as fast as you can. The Mariners have done it before with Julio, have a history of doing it, so I think it would make a lot of sense. Getting a successor to Felix Hernandez, ace status in Seattle. I think George Kirby can be that and is that. And finally, ending off with the World Series champion Rangers, Evan Carter. This is a pretty easy decision. He was a top prospect in the league, came up at the end of the year, was very impactful during the playoffs, showed why he was a top prospect. He was so good, really, really good, is a future of Texas, is a great hitter, going to be a great player in Texas for a long time. And I think if you extend him, you have one less contract to worry about in the future, especially with guys like Seager and Semien on the books for a long, long time. So I think extending Evan Carter makes a lot of sense for Texas, and I think it's something they should explore. That's all the teams here for the AL. We're going to take a break here, but before that, we're going to talk about NL candidates for what I just talked about in the next segment. So, excited to talk about that, and we'll see you after that. So, thanks.